All right, I want to move into the campaign because you talk about this in the book, and it was interesting. There's been a lot of talk recently about the Democrats attempting to get guys back, especially young men, going after the bro vote. And there was something in the beginning of the book when you were kind of going after the campaign and Biden had been dropped out. And Kamala Harris comes in and you talk about how she's going after the Divine Nine, the sorority of black sororities, and really getting them mobilized. And I thought to myself as I was reading this, is that when they really kind of wrote off men? They made an attempt to really go after women, in particular, black women in that particular case. But I was thinking, like, part of the problem with trying to get back men is that they don't realize that they pushed them out in the first place.
Yeah, look, I think there's been a very long pattern that goes back at least to Hillary Clinton and say 2010 or so, for Democrats to be increasingly centered on women and on people who have non-heterosexual lifestyles. If I can use a broad sweep. So as long as you were, a highly entitled woman that we could put on the cover of Vogue, you were terrific. And if you had any one of a dozen belief systems that were outside the norm, you were terrific. And what that did in part is it sent a signal to males that you don't count. You're not part of this. I had in the Biden administration, I had a very good friend who was a career civil servant who said in his department, he probably would never get promoted under Biden because he was a white male heterosexual. Therefore, they ticked all the wrong boxes for who was going to get promoted. You could be a white male gay or transsexual and get promoted, or you could be female and get promoted. And of course, the ideal probably was a black female transsexual, which would be the peak of achievement in the modern Democratic Party. Well, all of that sent a signal. Boy, you really see it, for example, with young black males. That famous scene where Obama's lecturing them about why they're not voting for Kamala. And it's clear that Obama doesn't get it. Now, these are people who have been turned off by the Democratic Party precisely because it has sent a signal that they should live in a matriarchy. And candidly, most young males aren't very eager to live. They've already had to endure having female teachers for most of their school years. And the idea that they're now going to spend the rest of their life in a matriarchy just doesn't attract them. And so they left. The party of weakness is probably not going to, in the long run, be the party of most males.
Well, another group that they pushed away that you mentioned in the book is Catholics that have done fairly well with Democrats in the past. And you really spent some time talking about the Al Smith dinner, that New York dinner that benefits some great charities, that Catholic Charities overseas. And what a mistake it was for her not to go and then kind of mock the dinner in this video with this Saturday Night Live type skit. It got me thinking because I kind of was wondering as I was reading that. I agree that she screwed up a lot with Catholics for a lot of reasons. But I guess the question is, how impactful do you think, since you've seen it over the years, that one dinner was in her sort of failure to attract Catholics to the campaign?
Well, all I can tell you is that Trump in 2024 became the first Republican to ever get a majority of the Catholic vote. He got 56%. No Republican had ever done that. They've gradually been coming towards the Republican Party on a lot of different issues, of which pro-life was probably the biggest, but also issues of national security, economic growth. I mean, again, Catholics aren't monolithic any more than anybody else. I think and Cliss and I watched it that night on TV, and frankly, it was, as you remember, she was the ambassador to the Vatican, so we had some general notion of the hierarchy, and we knew Cardinal Dolan pretty well. But first of all, when she said she wasn't coming, and Dolan made the comment, the only other person who has never come was Walter Mondale, and he carried one state. Now,
Uh,
I, Minnesota.
Minnesota.
I thought that was sort of a signal. But then that night, 100 million Americans, 1 billion 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 the the skit they did was anti-Catholic. I mean, you could tell the people advising Kamala had no understanding of Catholicism and no understanding of the pattern of the church. So here is a nationally televised dinner on behalf of Catholic Charities, hosted by Cardinal Dolan, with Donald Trump and his wife right there, and they get a video that is inherently mocking Catholicism. And you have to think to yourself, I mean, this is almost suicidal. It's almost like, please don't vote for us. And I thought that night, again, out of the 56% Trump got, maybe three or four were moved by the dinner, but it reinforced for all of them that they weren't going to be for Kamala.
Yeah.
And
It's
it
funny, though.
reinforced, by the way, remember, the Catholic Church has a huge number of priests and bishops around the country, and all of them got it. I mean, all of them understood this was our opponent.
Yeah. But it was funny because you talked about the fact it's one thing that she went one way with Catholics, and then she had an opportunity really to make inroads with Jewish voters in choosing Josh Shapiro. And you wrote that basically she didn't choose Shapiro for two reasons. One, that he was Jewish, and two, that he was kind of power hungry. And I found it interesting as I was reading it, going, okay, she's alienating Catholics, and then she had an opportunity to go in strong with Jewish voters and blew that one too.
Well, I don't know how much it actually hurt her. I'm not sure Shapiro was a symbol in most of the Jewish community, but what it did do is it cost her Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
And Shapiro
you think,
was
would
the
she have
only
got, wait,
Democrat.
you think that he would have made a difference?
He certainly would have made it close. He's very, very popular. He's very smart. But that was part of the problem. As our mutual friend who you're with every morning, Mark Halperin, said at the time, he's just too smart. I mean, they had one conversation and she realized she didn't want him next to her for 4 years because he was just too smart. She wanted a guy who was slow and stupid, and she got him in Waltz.
Well, in Waltz, though, it's funny because you detailed in the book the first CNN interview, and they blew. And this is the thing that I thought was funny. They inherit this Biden campaign that has so-called experts, all these, high-paid consultants and longtime hands, and they blew the interview because Waltz is seated wrong. He looks more important and like the alpha dog, and like I kind of like. You know this from running for president and being Speaker of the House. I remember back in the day, when you visited, there was like an 18-page, no offense, it was like an 18-page, this is how it works. He comes in, he's seated at this, the chair will be this. You guys were extremely professional. And I'm thinking about your description of this Waltz-Harris CNN interview. And the idea that all these experienced hands that she inherited from Biden couldn't pull off an interview on CNN correctly spoke volumes to me about the reality of where the campaign actually stood.
You could say, given that she raised and spent over $1 billion in 9 weeks, that no politician has ever spent so much so badly.
That's
They were goofy. I mean, first of all, Waltz himself is goofy. But I'll be interested to see if he can win the Senate seat, which I think he's going to run for. In Minnesota, basically, in Minnesota now, Democrats carry the two biggest counties and lose the entire rest of the state. And it'll be interesting to see if Waltz can sustain that momentum, or as people realize that he really is weird, if he can't even win the Senate seat.
So you don't think he's running for president?
I'd be happy for him to run for president. I mean, look, I think every strange person they can put up is to our advantage. And Seth Keshel, who's somebody I really respect,
he comes on all the time.
He's the leading student of registration in the country, and he said that since the election, there's been over 1 million votes shift from Democrat to Republican in registration. And I think that pattern is going to continue. And it's a combination that Trump is actually trying to solve real problems as seen by the American people. And the Democrats get steadily weirder, which, of course, you and I are talking in the middle of what's going to be, I think, this is going to be a very weird weekend. I mean, we start the week with Los Angeles, but there are 1,500 sites for demonstrations on Saturday. And I suspect also there will be demonstrations against the Army parade on Saturday. And I suspect the Democrats will be defending the demonstrators. I posted the other night on both X and Truth Social that that gang lives matter as the new Democratic slogan, and I got like 38,000 likes and 4,200 reposts within a day. I mean, because it hit a nerve, and every time you say something weird, 3 Democrats jump up and say that's right.
So I keep thinking to myself, and I'm being serious when I say this, that it shouldn't be this easy. I mean, I look at Gavin Newsom, Tim Walz, AOC. I'm like, they're on the side of criminals and lawlessness, and I never thought that we would be in a place where this. They might be heroes to their far left. Maybe that's true. I don't know because I'm not there. But I gotta believe that the average American says, I don't agree with looting. I don't agree with Apple stores getting broken into and smashing windows and burning cars. And when they side with those people, I gotta believe that, like, to your point about Seth Keshel's analysis, more and more people are getting pushed to the Republican side because they're like, I don't want to be part of that.
Well, I think that's a big part of what's going on. And I think the reason is in part that they've drunk the Kool-Aid. I think it's an almost religious cult. They get together in a room. I had a good friend who's very sophisticated and knows a lot of liberal Democrats, and who said, when he's in a social gathering with them, they actually think this stuff's smart. I think it's great that Newsom is standing up to Trump, and they have no notion that most Americans actually don't want to have people carrying foreign flags around burning cars in the middle of downtown Los Angeles, and that being the defender of the demonstrators is about a 15% position, and they just cannot unlock from it.
But I guess the question is, it's kind of like if you're looking at a sports team, you would say you guys need a rebuilding year. Because I look at these people and I say Gavin Newsom might be doing himself some short-term favors in a potential Democratic primary because he stood up to Trump. But the bottom line is the average person with a brain says, you stop gaslighting me. I'm watching with my own eyes you guys burning cars. It's not peaceful. It's not, you're attacking federal agents. The police chief himself has said this over and over again. We're overwhelmed. We need help. This got out of control. And I feel like when Democrats double down on that, most average people who aren't far left, far right, but the folks in the middle say, I can't be part of that. And I don't know how anybody can dig. It's one thing to cast a vote if you're a member of Congress. But if you have the video of Gavin Newsom saying the stuff that he does, I don't understand how that's even a potential president of the United States.
Look, I mean, when you look at, and I think it was doing Maria Bartiromo, but I saw a series of clips of Democrats talking about these were peaceful demonstrations. And you may remember there was one reporter in Los Angeles who said, well, they seem really happy and friendly gathered around the burning cars.
Just a lot of people having fun. A lot of people having fun.
I mean, you have to think to yourself, these people are certifiably crazy. And there are enough of them that they band together that the craziness seems normal. And so they go out and say these things knowing that in their group, that's exactly right. Now, the problem is their group is shrinking. I mean, the decline, and this is the point that Keshel made, there's not a single state in the country where voter registration shifted from Republican to Democrat. In every single state since the election, the marginal moves, some of them have been relatively small, but the moves have been consistently in every state from the Democrats to the Republicans in registration. Now, at a rational level, you would think that their professionals would be saying, this is really a bad sign. But you can't say it because they're so certain in an almost religious sense that what they stand for is so true that they can't allow any kind of rational data or rational analysis to affect the virtue of their commitment.
Is there anybody on their side that you think is either A, doing it well, or B, will be a really strong candidate for president if they were nominated?
Well, this is probably a sign I'm too much of a Washington insider in my knowledge. If there was one person who could break through, I would think it would be Rahm Emanuel.
But he can't get through the primary, can he?
Well, I don't know, but no, but he could get. He'd have to get through the primary by destroying the left. Now, whether or not he has the toughness to do it and can raise the money to do it, I mean, in a sense, you could argue Shapiro, that Shapiro might, I mean, or you could argue potentially the governor of Michigan, if she's willing to do it. But the problem for all of them is, this is why Sam Nunn never ran for president, because Nunn, who was one of the great national security Democrats, and very very popular in Georgia and basically pretty popular in the country, but he knew that in a Democratic primary the left would destroy him. So what Shapiro has to think about, and what the governor of Michigan has to think about, is if I stand up to these people, do I become so attacked that I become a polarizing figure and I inevitably lose? Or can I beat them? Can I stand up to them and beat them? I mean, for example, if Schumer runs, and I'm beginning to think he won't, but if Schumer runs, he can only win by destroying AOC. He cannot win with her still at her current level of popularity. I'm not sure in the Democratic primary, if you look at what's happening in the mayor's race, where I think we're going to get a socialist mayor of New York, who's also deeply anti-Jewish, anti-Israel, and has said a number of hateful things in general. But I think the odds are very high he's going to beat Cuomo. Well, if that's the nature of the Democratic Party in New York State, then I don't see how you beat AOC. And if you don't beat AOC, you now have a senator who is to the left of Bernie Sanders and younger and more energetic and more radical.
Could she? She won't be old enough. I want to talk. You kind of go through the branding of the MAGA movement in the book, and it got me thinking: is it transferable? Could it be handed to J.D. Vance or anyone else for that matter, or does it live and die with Donald Trump?
I don't think it could be handed, but I think it can be earned. I think J.D. Vance is much closer to Trump than George H.W. Bush was to Reagan. And ultimately, most of the Reagan support in the election in '88 shifted to Bush. It left him in '92 after he signed a tax increase. But there was a brief moment there when, even though Bush was in no way a Reaganite, nonetheless, the Reagan people were so grateful for 8 years of him standing next to Reagan that it gave him huge advantages. JD actually probably is pretty close to a MAGA person, and I think is probably authentically represents an anti-establishment intensity that fits sort of the general MAGA profile. So I think he's the most likely nominee. I mean, if the administration succeeds, it's very hard for me to see how the sitting vice president fails to get nominated. Now, whether they win the general election is a different question.
I want to end our conversation with the way you end the book, because you actually phrased this brilliantly. You call it the challenge of 2026, meaning keeping the House and the Senate. Now, I think that the way I'd like to frame this with you is, if you were trying to explain this to viewers, how critical is it to maintain a House and Senate majority? I think the Senate is frankly easy, so let's just focus on the House. How critical is it for Donald Trump and the MAGA movement to maintain a House Republican majority in 2026?
Well, it's a central intersection. If Trump can pull off what Franklin Roosevelt did and actually increase seats in the House, we will have affirmed the direction we're moving in. He'll have 2 more years of real reform and a chance then to elect a successor who continues the same momentum. If Trump loses the House in 26, he's back in a Nancy Pelosi problem. There'll be huge investigations, probable impeachments, fights over money. I mean, it'll be a mess. So, in my mind, and I felt this way starting in October when I knew Trump was going to win. The critical, this was true for us, by the way. When we won in '94, we were the first House Republican majority in 40 years. But in '96, no House Republican majority had been reelected since 1928. So, in a very real sense, 1996 was the key election because once we won there, we shifted the balance of power permanently in Washington. The Democrats had held for 60 years to 4 for Republicans, and after 1994, we've held it for 22 years to 8 for the Democrats. So this makes 26 decisive. If Trump can keep the House in 26, then I think you see the MAGA revolution really institutionalized, and you see a base then for the Republicans to win the general election in 28. And if you can get one more presidency in the Trump tradition, I suspect we will have permanently changed Washington.
Speaker Newt Gingrich, thanks for being here. Trump's Triumph, America's Greatest Comeback is the book. Another great bestseller for good reason. The historical approach, the way you bring your personal perch at events and everything into this. I loved the read. I thank you for coming. Thank you for your friendship, and appreciate your fight.
Great to be with you, as always. And I'll see you at 9 o'clock in the morning.
You will, every morning. Take care. Well, if you enjoyed this content, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and click the notification bell to get more.